Graham Barfield is an owner at Fantasy Points who previously worked at Fantasy Guru and the NFL Network. He also worked with me at Numberfire back in the day. He's the creator of Yards Created. He's an analytics nerd. I think he's the first Jacksonville Jags fan that's been on this show. These are his late round perspectives. This episode is sponsored by DraftKings. There's no better way to lock in your fantasy dominance early than with Best Ball on DraftKings, where you draft once and ride your roster all season long. And right now, DraftKings is giving all customers a can't-miss offer. Draft one, get one. Enter a lineup in the $15 million Best Ball contest for just $20, and you'll score another Best Ball ticket to play free for a share of that $15 million, giving you a second shot to win big. It's easy. Just draft your dream team once, no weekly management required, and let your top scorers automatically start each week. Across the whole season, every breakout star, every clutch play, every touchdown will count towards your quest for a share of $15 million. I'm drafting over there all the time. It's an absolute blast. So download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app now to draft your $20 Best Ball lineup to play for a share of $15 million and get a second ticket to play free for a share of that $15 million. That's two chances to win big without ever setting your lineup again. Draft one, get one, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 8778-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 18 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. One per customer. Enter the Best Ball $15 million headliner contest by 9/4/25 to get one bonus entry. $20 entry fee required. Reward expires in 30 days. See terms at DraftKings.com/NFL-best-ball. Sponsored by DK. Now back to the show. I always forget that you've got a Jags fandom background, don't you?
Yeah, it's there's a dozen of us. We are very strong, this dozen. All of us have Travis Hunter meetings where we basically just watch his highlights and eat donuts. Yeah. It's a good time.
Are you from Florida, right? And then you moved out west, or didn't you live in Florida at one point?
Yeah, I back in the Numberfire days, good memory, man.
Yeah, that's right.
I worked with you. God, man, that was 2013 or 14, and I was at UNF in Jacksonville. So
that's right.
Yeah, I'm a nomad, though. I grew up in North Carolina. I moved to Florida when I was a kid. Went to college there, then moved to Atlanta, moved to LA. I'm in Denver now.
Yeah, you've been everywhere.
Yeah, I'm doing a whole NL West tour for anybody that's a baseball fan. I'm a Dodgers. I got Dodgers, Rockies. I just need to knock off the D-backs.
Yeah. Just go to Arizona real quick. What part of North Carolina did you... I don't think I realized that. What part of North Carolina did you grow up in?
Yeah, Boone, North Carolina. App State was like my backyard.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're not far from me at all, with me being in Charlotte now.
Yeah, you're Charlotte. Yeah, dude, I love North Carolina. Like, if I move back to the East Coast, if I ever move back, that'd be where we go. It's
a great place to live, man. It's just it's easy living, good weather. You get the mountains really close. You get the beach real close. Like, you can get to either destination within a couple hours. It's nice.
Yeah, amazing food, amazing people, just like salt of the earth people, just like super, super kind. Yeah, man.
It's great. You already mentioned the Numberfire stuff. I got to bring up the Numberfire stuff to start this off. So for those of you who don't know, Graham was with me at Numberfire. I guess it was like 2013-ish time for, like, you were one of the early ones, to the point where when I would recruit people to write at Numberfire way back in the day, this is when we were like purely a startup. This is pre-FanDuel acquisition, all of that. I would call, like, literally a phone call, each analyst, and I would sit and explain expected points to that analyst, because we really wanted to push, because expected points wasn't nearly as just like everywhere as it is today. And so, like, Numberfire had net expected points, which was the formula that Keith Goldner, the chief analyst, had created. I would call, we really wanted to push it, right? So I would call the analysts who were about to write for Numberfire, explain expected points. You were one of those calls, right? Because it was early on. So you had to been one of those. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I remember those calls. I remember all the edits. Like, you spent a lot of time with me on the edits and stuff, and definitely definitely helped. But man, we had an all-star group. That was that was a huge credit to you and like the hiring, but like Reeves was a part of that group. Brandon, obviously Scott Barrett, my guy, like that. I mean, we had, who else, man?
Raybon was there for a little while.
Oh my God. That is right. Raybon was there. Jim Sands.
I talk about the Raybon thing's crazy because Raybon.
That's right.
I found him because I wrote an article on Russell Wilson potentially being the best young quarterback ever, because it was like right after they had won their Super Bowl, their first. That's the one where I guess the one that they actually won. And I wrote this article and I got this email back that was like 7 paragraphs long, really detailed. There was a bunch of analysis and it was from Raybon, and Raybon's like tearing this article apart. And my response was like some people email and I'm like, okay, you're just being obnoxious about this and you're just doing this because you wanted to like vent about something. But Raybon like had like legit analysis, and my response to him was like, yo, this is good. You want to write for the site? And so he came on board and he wrote for Number Fire for a decent amount of time. And then obviously he's gone out and done greater and bigger things. You know, he's more on the sports betting side at this point too. He does some fantasy stuff, but yeah, man, it's crazy. And then you and Barrett are still doing stuff together to this day.
Yes, sir. Yeah, Fantasy Points going strong here. 6 years. We've got just an incredible amount of content, new product coming out this summer. Super stoked about that. Obviously, Data Suite has been wildly successful. Brett Whitefield and his team charting every game. We've just, we've got our little niche. It's cool. I never take it for granted. Like, it's certainly a blessing to do what I do. Mm-hmm. This has been, it's just like, I knew when I was growing up and I took my first ever accounting internship and I got into an office. It was a great place to work, but I was like, man, I don't think I can do an office thing. Like, I got to figure this out. Yeah. And, trust me, I feel super, super blessed, man, to work with not just like my friends like Scott, but just, to work in this space, man. I mean, it's just so cool to do football, talk ball, talk with people like you every day. Yeah. It's one of those things where I still pinch myself, honestly. I still think about those Number Fire days that were, 10 years ago now, 12 years ago now, but it's crazy.
Well, look, I can say two things to that. First off, when you talked about like me editing your content and stuff way back in the day, and like us having back and forths and like really trying to like, figure out how to get the best article out there, you can tell Scott this. And I'm not assuming he would listen to this, but you can tell Scott that you were an easier edit than Scott was. For you, it was like always like a gradual, you're getting better and better every article, right? For Barrett, it was like he was flatlining to start, and it was just over and over again, like just trying, like slamming your head into a wall over and over again. And then it clicked, and he talked about that when he was on Perspectives. When it clicked, then he rocket shipped and he, like figured it out and like, became the analyst that he is now. But you can tell Scott that you were the easier edit of the two of you.
I'll hold that over him. Trust me.
There you go. But yeah, man, I mean, I think that the gratitude to be able to do this is really important. Like, to me, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but to me, like, I'm always pushing like my analysis and like wanting to figure out new ways to do things and figure things out, because I know that there is someone on my heels that's trying to get this job. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a really important piece for me, at least.
Yeah, it's not just that. It's not just that this is a highly competitive space. Eyes are wide open, like journalists and everything. It's just been like on the downward trend for a number of years. And now we've got AI coming in to kind of give us even more existential threat. So I feel the same way. Like, I am always I just think of it as like keeping my skills sharp. Like, I never want to feel like my skills and my ability is like, like flatlining or just like dull or whatever. Like, I always want to be trying to learn new things. And we've got some amazing analysts like Ryan Heath.
Yeah, I had him on Perspectives. This offseason.
Bro, he would have been a Number Fire legend back in the day. Like,
he would, and him and I, like, I see like the way that he looks at stuff. I'm like, man, it would have been so much fun to like be working alongside you and doing work with you and stuff. Yeah,
that's the thing, is like, I guess maybe I'm biased towards data-driven people because that's the way my brain works. But, I think you people like you, Ryan, Scott too, like, you got to have that mix of data-driven analysis, but also using your gut,
right.
You've been playing for so long. Like, at the end of the day, like,
Right.
you kind of have to use and lean on that experience. So I think it's super important to have a bit of both.
Yeah, 100%. Can I ask, like, with your journey in the space, like now you're doing the Fantasy Points stuff, talk about like the inception of Fantasy Points and how that all came about.
Sure. So I worked I was hired out of college by John Hansen at Fantasy Guru. I was working 3 part-time writing jobs, Roto World, Fantasy Labs. I think I was still doing a little bit Number Fire at the time. John hired me with Joe Dolan. So I worked with Guru and Joe from like 17 until it was 16 until 19. And I took a job at the NFL. A couple years go by, working at the NFL. John calls me. He's like, "Hey man, I got this idea. We meet at the Combine in Indy in like maybe 19."
Yeah.
And he just pitches me the idea. And I'm like, "This is brilliant. We need one more person though. And I have the perfect guy, and it's Scott." Yeah. And he's like, "No kidding." We tried to hire Scott. Scott was apparently like, it was he and I in the last 2 in the interview process at Guru.
That's funny.
So John and Joe knew Scott extremely well. And it was just one of those things where like we all get along really well. We all kind of see the game similarly, but we just we wanted to have this like full service fantasy site where we have not just good analysts, but entertaining analysts. Mm-hmm. And it's just kind of morphed. It's not just content now. Like I said, we've got Brett Whitefield, who's a former PFF and trained employee who's working on their sales team, leading out our charting team of 25 charters, charting every NFL game. We've just we've gotten from just a little fantasy shop talking about redraft and best ball and dynasty to an actual full blown business with tools. And it's just it's super humbling, but it's also super cool, man. Like to have this niche, and to have the audience and everything. Like like I said, I started saying this. It's kind of this is like a full circle thing, man. Because like you've absolutely blown up, JJ. Like it's been cool to see you, and like it's just cool to see all the guys that like I know were putting in the work at Number Fire and all those days and years ago, like still doing it, still balling, and kind of doing our own thing and succeeding in it.
Yeah, you can usually tell, like, like you and Scott in particular just like cared a lot, right? And so you were working hard at what that thing was. And there's some people, like, no shade to those people, but like they have full-time jobs that they're not trying to necessarily make that a career. And I think that that's something that like needs to be okay. I see a lot of people on like social media when it comes to fantasy football analysis and stuff where they're like, I don't really, this is just a fun thing that I do. And that's fine. Like, you don't have to make this a full-time thing. Do whatever your mind and family life and life in general, leads you to do. But you can always tell when there's like that person who just really would love to, I think a lot of people would love to do it full time, but understand that there are limitations to doing that. But, there are people like you or Scott or Raybon where it was just very glaringly obvious that this is what you guys wanted. So it's great to see that you're thriving though. Yeah, man. I just, I eat, sleep, and literally dream about football. Like literally probably about half of my dreams are football or fantasy related. It's crazy. Disgusting. It is so gross. Yes. Like I'm coming up with like article ideas in my dreams. I was just like, it's one of those things, man. Like I said, I don't take it for granted for sure. Yeah. I don't know. The space now, it's different for sure. There's obviously more people. Everybody's kind of trended towards this more data-driven analysis. Like it is certainly harder to come up now than it was when I did or Scott did or Raybon. Yeah. Or when AJ. I did. Yeah. Yeah. When you did, certainly harder. But, I feel like there's just more tools at our disposal now. Does that make sense? 100%. Yeah. There's definitely, and I think to your point though, about like, I really try to not let data just dictate literally everything with my analysis, because you need that gray area thinking. You need to not just like be boxed in with that way of thinking. And it's kind of weird where, we've gotten to the point where, data analysis, like you said, is kind of like the norm for the industry. So like, I always think back to like rookie drafts and stuff, because I think it's like the easiest way to look at this from just and compare this. But with rookie drafts, 90% of analysts are doing things via production metrics and things that they're, in your case, which we'll get to in a second with like yards created, things that these guys are doing in college, that's more film based, obviously, but like, it's still at least transferring that stuff that you're watching into digits and stuff. But there's almost a competitive advantage to leaning against what, some of these like numbers are saying, like you could sit there all day long and say Matthew Golden's, production profile and age-adjusted production profile is trash, which, the ZAP model certainly didn't like love Golden's numbers, but there's also, it wasn't as atrocious as being a 0 or as atrocious as some other guys that have come out that are more glaringly obvious. It's almost like if you can have some of that nuance to your data analysis, that's really how you're now gaining that edge in the fantasy football space, as opposed to just like having a good model and sticking with that model.
Exactly. Yeah. Context is king at the end of the day. I think the golden standard is somebody who can take the data or, whatever it is you're looking at, receivers, running backs, quarterbacks, whatever, but they also like understand football. You know what I mean? Like
right.
They understand how fantasy points are scored on a real, field. Real quick, with receivers in particular, it's one of those things like running backs, and I guess we'll talk about Jaden Blue maybe, but running backs are held back by a number of things, and it can be just as simple as the competition in front of them.
Yep.
With receivers though, man, it's like, if you're not earning targets like Matthew Golden, are you going to earn targets at the NFL level? Like,
right.
There is some like level of like data driven analysis where it's like, okay, we can kind of like, this is who that player is at the end of the day. Like with receivers in particular, it's very, very rare for a receiver to come out and not be, a guy who's not targeted in college to come out. And I
think a lot of it, I've always seen it as puzzle building, right? Yeah. Where like a guy like Golden has all of these red flags, but he does have the draft capital. This is just analytic based, right? But he does have the draft capital thing. He is an early declare, which does matter. I think that the early declare stuff has gotten to the point where people aren't thinking about it properly. They see early declare and they think only in terms of, okay, he left college early and therefore he's more talented, which is definitely a huge piece of the early declare thing. But to me, what I've come to realize it probably means more of is a player that's an early declare. Matthew Golden's the perfect example of this. A player that's an early declare doesn't have the benefit of playing that extra 25% of their college career, right? Which means their production profile is inherently going to be a little bit lower and worse, hypothetically, unless you're like an elite player that declared early, which happens pretty frequently. But a guy like Matthew Golden, I think that there's a hypothetical out there where he stays at Texas, right? And this year he has a 3.25, yards per team pass attempt rate. His yards per route run is great. And everything just really comes together for Golden as a senior. And what I try to do is envision a scenario of, okay, Golden's first 3 years are this. We know that because it already happened, right? What would have happened if Golden had a really good year as a senior? How would people be reacting to that player, in the fantasy streets and in rookie drafts, where I think we do a lot of like threshold looking, which I do too. Yeah. Like I love to bucket these guys and try to see like, oh, what have we seen historically? It's part of my process as well. And it's in the prospect guide and all of that. But at the same time, when you're doing that for a player like Golden, he's at an inherent disadvantage, right? A natural disadvantage because he didn't play that extra year. So I do think that like, that's the nuance I really am trying to dig into more with a lot of that analysis, as opposed to like having those thresholds, having those groups, having those buckets and saying, no way can this one thing happen because this has happened in the past.
I like that. I like that a lot. And with early declare specifically, these guys, I guess with receiver, it matters more. In particular with Golden, not to keep, hitting on the guy.
He's a great example. Yeah.
But he is a great example of this. Like, he had significant target competition for all these years.
Right.
Now you mentioned he's got the draft capital, got the landing spot. I think with receiver, there's just way more nuance I've discovered in my 10 years. I don't know if you agree with this, but I think there's just way more nuance in receiver evaluation than there is with running backs. It's like I can turn on, I start charting these guys in March, April. This year was a little later. I was a little late this year, but I just think there's way more nuance with receiver production and all that than running back production.
Yeah.
And within 3 or 4 games, I'm telling you, like every year this happens, I already know. Like
right.
The yards created numbers don't necessarily balance out because one big play can kind of it can change it, but within a couple of games, you can kind of already get a sense of who a player is. Where with receivers, Quinn Ewers was terrible. Like, right. He was terrible for a long time. Same thing. It's the same exact conversation we had with Xavier Worthy last year. It's like, okay, the ball tracking's not great, but it's like, was it the ball tracking or was it Quinn Ewers not throwing very many catchable targets?
Yeah. I do think that like part of it is that wide receivers. Now I'm going to ask you about yards created too, so that folks can kind of see what you're talking about when you're talking about charting and all that kind of stuff. But like, I do think with wide receivers that people, I think Harmon's done a really good job of explaining this and talking through this, obviously with reception perception, but every wide receiver is playing essentially a different position, right? Like there are these sub positions within wide receiver. At running back, I think, you could make the argument that there is that, you have certain specialists that can obviously do different things and lining up across the line of scrimmage, maybe playing the slot a little bit. They're going to be better or worse as pass catchers, and they're going to be better or worse as pass blockers. But at the end of the day, like, they're fitting within a similar mold as a running back, whereas wideouts are just doing all these different things, and there's a bigger discrepancy in even like body types and stuff. And like, there's like you're saying, there's just so many more layers to it. Whereas there's probably not as many, but there's still, and this is what I want to ask you about with like yards created. Like there's still some nuance that you need to look through and dig through with offensive line play, for instance, right? So I want you to just explain yards created, what made you come up with it, and just what it's all about.
Sure. So yards created has been around now for 2016. It's my charting process for college running backs. And basically, yards after contact is a fine metric. But as we all know, if a running back was contacted behind the line of scrimmage by one guy who, the defensive tackle got through because the offensive lineman, the guard, blew his block.
Yeah.
But the rest of the offensive line did their job. That's still yards after contact for the running back. And the inverse of this, JJ, as we know, I think running backs should be attributed some yards before contact as well. There's a lot of running backs that, let's stick with that example. Let's say a guard on the interior blows his block, that running back jukes him out, but the rest of the line does his job. The running back redirects and gets back to the hole. That should be yards blocked. You know what I'm saying? Right. So that was my impetus. Just like watching the games, it's like yards after contact, yards before contact. It does a decent job, but I don't think it tells the full picture. So yards created is simply what the running back gets after the offensive line has done its job or has not done its job. And in college football, especially these days, man, college offensive line play is rough. Yeah. Like if you think the NFL offensive line play is bad, man, college is significantly worse. The other part of yards created that I think is a little different and worth getting into is I also chart missed tackles forced a little differently. So PFF, SIS, two main charting companies that chart college games, every college game. I'm not entirely sure how they do missed tackles forced, but I've noticed throughout the years my numbers are sometimes they're more or less directionally about the same, but they're pretty different at times.
Yeah.
So by my definition of missed tackle forced, I kind of am a little more lenient, I think. I typically end up charting a few more missed tackles forced only because I give running backs credit for their speed. So, for example, when Ashton Janty is just breaking angles or Bashil Tutin's breaking angles and a defender is at basically in front of him or at equal standing in terms of their position on the field and Tutin's just running past him, that's a missed tackle force. Like if that cornerback has no chance simply because you're faster, that should be missed tackle. So a little bit of a long-winded answer, but I'm basically just charting yards and missed tackles. And throughout the years, there have certainly been some big hits. There's been some big misses for sure, but I think this process is proven to be directionally accurate. And in terms of its correlation to future fantasy points, I went back and looked at this in 2022. Yards created is more predictive of career fantasy points than any counting metric. So that's like rushing yards per game, receptions per game, receiving yards per game. And as you and I both know, athletic testing measures are very, very, with receivers in particular, and we can get into running backs. I think this matters more, but with receivers, there's like no correlation.
Yeah, I don't care at all.
Yeah, don't care at all. I don't even think it's included in your model anymore.
No, it's not.
Yeah. Running backs, I think it matters a little more, like especially weight adjusted 40s. Weight matters.
Speed score
sure.
stuff. Yeah.
But that's about it, man. Like, athletic testing measures are very noisy. especially at running back where volume matters more than anything at the end of the day. So yeah, I mean, it's just very hard to find a good efficiency metric in football. Yeah. It's very hard, especially hard to find one that correlates to success. We're all trying to work through those very small margins, but yards created is proven to be a small margin booster.
Have you been able to, because like the ZAP model now is so receiving focused at running back. Actually, I don't even have rushing metrics in this iteration of the ZAP model, which is why
I was talking to Reeves and Scott about this, and Reeves brought it up, and he was like, dude, JJ's not even putting rushing yards in. I'm like, that makes sense.
Yeah. Honestly. Right. It's just, it's so inconsistent. And like, I do think that there's a possibility that next year when I test things, I add something in there as more of like a baseline, like don't get too high, don't get too low on certain players, right? But I think it's capturing what it needs to capture right now because I've tested it and stuff, and like it doesn't seem to, like the receiving stuff is what seems to matter most, just based on like what we're doing and how we're applying this stuff. Because I'm not, at the end of the day, I'm not trying to solve which running back is actually the best runner or the best like for this scheme. I'm trying to solve which running back is going to give us an advantage in fantasy football, right? Exactly. And it seems as though draft capital is not capturing receiving numbers as much as it would be capturing, rushing numbers. If I wasn't using draft capital, I guarantee you I'd be using rushing metrics more. But I think that that's just inherently capturing a lot of those numbers.
Draft capital is absolutely capturing rushing profile. And to that point, I don't even know if rushing production matters when you get drafted. Like, to be honest with you, your bulk rushing production might not even matter anymore. Mm-hmm. We know when you get drafted, especially at running back, if you get drafted early, you're getting the freaking ball. The last 3 guys that were drafted in the top 8 overall, they had last 4 guys that were drafted in the top 8 overall, they had at least 300 opportunities. All of them did, including Bijan. Bijan had got to 301 opportunities. Carries plus targets. On average, those guys got 340 opportunities. Yep. Zeke, Fournette, Bijan. Now we've got Jainty. You look at the hit rates especially on day 2. I mean, they fall off the board. Even once you get into like the 125s overall on day 3. Yep. So there is, in terms of directional accuracy, I think draft capital is just specifically for dynasty, rookies. Like that's kind of just, I know it's simple. Like we all have our guys, maybe some people love Dylan Sampson and he fell, but hey, like at the end of the day, draft capital tells us a whole lot about how these teams are going to use these players.
Yeah, exactly. And so with that being in it, I just don't care as much about the rushing portion of things. But my question with you doing yards created stuff, like, is that naturally helping you as an analyst, like understand their receiving profiles? Cause you're obviously gonna naturally like see those plays as well.
Bashal Tutin's a great example of this. 22 catches, 80 yards his last season. Everybody's like, hey, is he a good receiver? Is he going to be able to have a 3-down profile? You watch every play of Bashal Tutin, you're going to see what I saw. And it's just a lot of flats, a lot of screen, a lot of just kind of, spacing patterns and horrific quarterback play. There were a few targets that should have easily been, caught because Tutin just got a terrible target. Absolutely, it does. I think with college now, JJ, these college offenses, I don't know if you go to high school games. I'm a full-on degenerate. So I've seen, when I lived in Atlanta and there was some great college ball, or high school ball, I take my brother to some of the high school games, and you watch high school and you watch college and you're like, this is the same game because it's first down screen, 2nd and 7 run. Yeah. You're spacing guys out. There's lots of motion. The reads are extremely condensed. There are just very few offenses in college that even remotely resemble the NFL. Yeah. So when that comes back to, scouting running backs, it makes some of these evaluations harder for sure. Like Jalen Wright, I know we're talking about the 25 class here, but Jalen Wright, Dylan Sampson, these guys are good examples of this. That Tennessee offense is a joke.
Yeah.
It's a joke.
For wide receivers too, right? Like when we didn't know how to really evaluate Jalen Hyatt coming out. Like it was a really tough evaluation because of that.
Bro, Cedric Tillman's like the only guy who's like good.
Yeah. and like we don't even know if he's good, right?
Like, exactly. Like he's had a 2 or 3 game sample where he's like been okay. Yeah. It's just one of those things. Like Tennessee's a great example because They stack 4 receivers on the outside. There's 5 or 6 guys in the box on every play. So I haven't changed yards created in terms of the process, charting it at all since 16. Yeah. Nothing has changed. The only thing that's changed is my access to film. 16 and 17, I was charting off broadcast footage, which was a nightmare. Now that I have all 22.
Oh my gosh, that would be awful.
Dude, it's the end zone. You just have to have the end zone view.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing that's changed in yards created. But I've just noticed anecdotally, man, like some of these college offense, I mean, they're just brutal to watch. Virginia Tech was one of them. Tennessee was again one of them. Ashton Jainty, 6.19 yards created per attempt, JJ, behind the second, or now actually the worst offensive line in this class. It was really close between UCF, Virginia Tech, and Boise State. But that's what yards created tries to identify. It's like, okay, some of these offensive lines are terrible. Which running backs are having to work harder to not just generate yards, but force missed tackles? And those two things have generally, in terms of directional accuracy, have proven to be pretty predictive.
So before I ask you about this year's class, I want to talk about historical results. Like, sure. I think people like to give context and stuff, and they like the humility and the openness of, because you're a transparent analyst, as I am, and we're not going to get everything right. We're not going to get everything wrong. But I want to hear some of the bigger like hits that you've seen, and then maybe one of the biggest misses that you've seen, and if you can look back and even say why, and if you saw those things coming.
Lots of hits, lots of misses for sure. You do this for nearly 10 years. I've charted 111 running backs. That's in the database. I've seen more hits than misses, though. In terms of the big hits, Joe Mixon was one. He's still top of the database at 6.75 yards created per attempt. Saquon Barkley was kind of, everybody was on him, but yards created really illuminated how elusive he was. I don't think anybody's ever going to touch his missed tackle force number. Just going down the board, though, Alvin Kamara and Kareem Hunt are probably the two that I go back to the most. Both were, day 2 picks.
Yep.
Both were extremely good in yards created. Both have had awesome success. Obviously, Kamara is a perennial RB1. Hunt was a terrific value in rookie drafts. Some of the misses, I think one of the biggest ones is definitely Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I certainly overstated the landing spot for him. His yards created profile was not that great. He had 4.5 yards created per attempt, but I really I loved his elusiveness, and I thought that would carry over into the NFL. He had really good missed tackle force numbers, top, I think, 85th percentile. CH was certainly one for me, man, where landing spot absolutely matters. Draft capital really matters, but I ended up ranking Jonathan Taylor ahead of him, excuse me. I've ranked CH ahead of JT. That was certainly a lesson learned. On the other end of things, Darrell Henderson and Anthony McFarland really popped in yards created. And this is one of those things, man, where big plays matter a ton. And I've had a number of discussions with Scott, a number of Brett about, hey, should I be like adjusting for these big plays? And I've come back to just know, like, they happened. You have to chart them the way they are.
Right.
But Darrell Henderson and Anthony McFarland certainly, they popped in yards created. If you search in the database, you're going to see those guys at the top, but it's because, they were big play, merchants. You look at the sustaining type runs. I also, in my database, I include this intentionally, the percentage of plays that you create at least 5 yards, and Henderson and McFarland were both pretty poor in both those metrics. So, big plays certainly can have, an impact on yards created, especially when the samples are small. Henderson and McFarland were both not full-time runners. But at the end of the day, I chart those plays the same way I chart all of them. It's 25 yards blocked for an offensive line. And if it's a 60-yard touchdown, like, I have to give those 35 yards to the running back. So that is the one hole, I think, in yards created, is like some of these small sample guys like Henderson, like McFarland, that had some really big plays kind of stand out. Rashad Penny's another good example. But they didn't have the sustaining type runs, on top of that.
Yep.
I think those are the biggest misses for sure.
All right, so let's talk about this class. Is Ashton Genty, is he elite? Is he like the elite of the elite? just you shouted out his yards created number. Like, where does that place him versus other guys in the past?
Yeah, bro, he is everything. Obviously watched a bit of him being out here on the West Coast, but then getting into the charting, you pick up on the nuances, the footwork, the vision. Obviously, I said the offensive line was really bad, bottom of the class. Yeah, Ashton Genty, 98th percentile in terms of yards created per attempt. He's the truth, man. Like Joe Mixon, Ashton Genty, Saquon Barkley are the only 3 running backs to create over 6 yards per carry and have at least 0.4 missed tackles forced per carry. Just elite company.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I have a single thing negatively to say about Genty. If like you're nitpicking, okay, the pass protection wasn't that great, but I'm with a prospect like him, like who cares?
Yeah.
Like really, who cares?
Right. Yeah. They're going to feed him regardless. So it's all good. Amarian Hampton, he scored a 98 in the Zap model, which is there's a pretty big gap when you go from like the 99s, which is Genty. Genty was the second best Zap score, had the second best Zap score in its history behind CMC. And so, you had them in like the high 99s, and then you get into like the 98, 97 range. And those are still very, very good running backs, like borderline elite running backs. They're just not like the Bijan types, right? But the model really liked Amarian Hampton. So I'm very curious as to where yards created had Hampton.
Yeah, loved hearing that the production models all loved Hampton. Yards created also loves Hampton. 74th percentile yards created per attempt, 5.1 per carry. Also forced 0.4 missed tackles forced per carry. I said in my article on Fantasy Points that if you gave a bulldozer a Ferrari V12 engine, that's Amarian Hampton. Yeah. The dude is just... He's so fast, so big, so strong, fights through contact extremely well, gets those extra yards, churning his feet. I think the one thing with him, JJ, is that he's maybe just a little stiff. Most of his missed tackles were through speed and power. But when you force that many missed tackles through speed and power alone, like, he's just a perfect fit in this Chargers.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
that's the thing. Like,
downhill, man, holy crap.
And some of that will obviously translate, even if all of it doesn't translate. You're still going to see that bulldozing mentality, hit the NFL. One that I'm really curious with, and I kind of saw a sneak peek. I tried to not dig into your stuff too heavily, knowing that I was going to talk to you, about this. But I did see that RJ Harvey looked pretty decent. He had surprising draft capital to most, in the draft when the Broncos took him. Pre-draft, I was probably more in than out, but I was not one of the truthers out there, with Harvey, where they were just like all about him and stuff, because you had the age profile. But one of the comps that I had that the model spit out for him was Chase Brown, to give that and we've seen the Chase Brown upside or the upside hit at this point. But where did RJ Harvey stand?
I loved RJ Harvey. Yards created, loved RJ Harvey. 5.7 yards created per attempt is elite. We were talking about Kareem Hunt, Alvin Kamara, 2 players that yards created identified. That's around the range that those guys were at. Kamara was at 5'8", Hunt just a little bit below at 5'4". Harvey's awesome, man. Dealt with a horrific offensive line. The interior of UCF's offensive line was so bad, man. Like, there were so many plays where he would have to stop his feet behind the line of scrimmage and make somebody miss, and he did it all the time.
Yeah. The
interior of that line was terrible. Malzahn, it's a zone running game, so Harvey was constantly having to kind of redirect to find, the way the zone was supposed to go, and he has just got some freak physical traits, man.
Yeah.
It shows in the yards created numbers, shows in the missed tackle force numbers. And now he lands in this like perfect spot, like Sean Payton run game, super productive. Yeah. I'm not surprised he didn't pop in your Zap model simply because of the production. I did want to talk to you about, we were talking about early declares and age. Like, how much should we be adjusting for? This seems to be a running theme every year. Marshawn Lloyd, Trey Benson last year. These guys tear their ACLs as freshmen all the time.
Yeah.
Like, should we be adjusting for that? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, if I had a database of all that stuff, I would easily look into it and try to see, like when people ask questions like that, cause I get questions like that often. It's like, my response is always like, if I had the data, of course I would look into it. It's not something that's been high on the priority list to go and sift, because that's so much data entry type stuff that you would then have to do. But that's the thing. This is what I was talking about at the top with nuance, with data. RJ Harvey's a great example of that, where if you look at his journey, so obviously he's over 24, he's an older back, played a lot in college. But if you look at his journey, he started as a quarterback, right? Mm-hmm. And then he switches to running back, and then he tears his ACL, right? And so like, he's already 2 or 3 years behind just based on that alone. And so it's not that surprising that late career production happened with Harvey versus, some other running back and it was similar. Like last year, I really liked Tyrone Tracy. Tyrone Tracy was an older prospect as well, but he played wide receiver. So he obviously played a lot more and there was also the pandemic stuff that threw things off. It's finally not throwing things off as much as it did that in that like 2-year period with guys coming out. But like even that added an extra year to a lot of these guys' profiles. I'll say overall, like generally speaking, age matters. Like generally speaking, you want younger running backs versus older running backs, but it's not everything, right? And if you have a story to tell, which is why I love doing the profiles and the prospect guide every year, because I can break down and really like dig into each of these guys and like see why certain things were happening and like, why they transferred or, if they played another position beforehand, like all that stuff is important to put that puzzle together, right? So with Harvey, the model, part of the reason that the model it doesn't hate him, but it did group him as a higher risk player. It wasn't so much the age per se. It was also, there is signal between NFL mock draft data and where the guy actually gets drafted. At running back, I merged the two. So 90% of their draft capital score goes to their actual draft capital and 10% of it goes to where they were projected to get drafted, right? Because that's a whole other set of people that are putting their eyes on. And then at wide receiver, it's more so I'm worried about the reaches only, like the guys who, ended up going like Isaac Tesla or something like that.
That was the first one that came to my mind.
Yeah, the guys who like those guys have not like they get dinged in the model. Doesn't mean I'm gonna fade them because Pat Bryant was one that I'm actually not fading, and he was projected to go late, and he still again like the model gives him a ding and says, hey, red flag, like this isn't a good thing. But you have to compare all that to cost all the time, right? Even Isaac Tesla, he's like a 4th round rookie pick. I don't care if anyone drafts Isaac Tesla because a day 2 wide receiver who's going late in your rookie drafts, I'm not going to say the difference would be if a guy like Tesla or Bryant were like 1-2 turn guys, like that's when we adjust our stance and we say, hey, this is a really, really big red flag. And I'd be shouting from the rooftops, don't draft these guys. But when it comes to the age stuff at running back, like I'm more open than I think people would imagine based on the fact that it's an input in the model. It is an input in the model. We haven't seen really like Tyrone Tracy since 2011 is the only running back that has given us anything of substance that's been that entered the league like post 24 years old, like after his 24th birthday. And so, I'm not saying that it can't happen for Harvey. I'm drafting Harvey, and I love him in every format, but I do think that like, you can just kind of pile all of these different aspects up and create the story and see where it all lands at the end of the day.
Yeah. Harvey is going to be an outlier for sure for a number of reasons, mainly because of his age. I do think it's interesting though, like this debate of like, okay, he was 23 years old and balling out against 19-year-olds last year. Like that certainly has a little staying power to me, but do we really ding that against him? Like he tears his ACL. He was a converted quarterback. He has 2 years. We have 2 years on him, and the 2 years that we have, is his senior and now whatever redshirt senior year. If those are your first 2 years ever playing running back after being a converted quarterback,
it's like, impressive,
dude. Not just impressive, like really freaking great.
Yeah,
the offensive line, like he's an outlier. Yeah, the age matters for sure, but like at running back, draft capital and give me the ball. And dude, we're really concerned about Audric Estime. Like I liked Estime a little bit in the last year's weak class, but these guys are on different planes as prospects.
The thing that with Harvey that gets me excited, and this is where I've really come around from. So like I do my rookie ranks literally the night the draft ends, then I send out the prospect guide, right? So my rookie ranks don't change. They're my immediate reaction. I'm not looking at what the market's doing or anything like that. And my stance was kind of like, I didn't, the model didn't mind Caleb Johnson, and I could see the vision of 2026 with Caleb Johnson. If he does have a decent season in 2025, we know that this team historically has actually used bell cows, and I know that they haven't in recent years, but Jaylen Warren could be gone next year. And if Caleb Johnson has a good year this year, that's the long-term play. But if you want the immediate production, it was Harvey. So I just grouped them in the same tier, right? But the more that the sort of like the month has gone on since the draft, the more I've sort of swapped, and I now have Harvey ahead of Johnson in my dynasty rankings, same tier still, but like ahead of Johnson. I flip-flop that mostly because I see the vision for this year one going very, very favorably for him versus Johnson. There might be more growing pains. So like long term, I can still see Johnson being the better like producer, what have you, but I'm also playing the market a bit. And I'm also playing this idea of like, I care deeply about how well these guys get off in their careers. And with RJ Harvey, and I want to ask you this with him, his receiving profile was fine. It wasn't elite. It wasn't bad. It was fine. And when you look at this backfield, though, Audric Esme, we know, is not a pass catcher. He didn't catch passes at Notre Dame. He didn't catch passes last year. He had like 5 targets last year. Jaleel McLaughlin is, I think, typecasted as that guy, but he's only seen like a 7 to 8% target share max in his first 2 seasons, with Denver. And so who is going to catch passes in that backfield this year? Maybe they really are playing a game with us all, and they're going to use like Blake Watson or something like that. And they're going to, or Tyler Bidet is just going to, who I actually did like coming out. I like both of those guys coming out, but maybe they use those guys in that role, but it just seems obvious that RJ Harvey is going to catch a lot of passes. And so doing that analysis more, thinking through it more, I become way more pro RJ Harvey than I expected to be.
Just think about the Sean Payton offense and what
it's crazy.
Dude, it's a West Coast offense, design reads, lots of screens. Nick's obviously at the end of last season in particular, he really started stretching the field a lot better. You saw the deep throws start, kind of coming into this offense. It will be a lot of checkdowns and a lot of screens. Yep. And when I think of these guys like, okay, maybe RJ Harvey isn't Christian McCaffrey out there just chopping, ankles in half on angle routes and underneath routes. However, can he explode in the open field? Can he force, miss tackles in tight spaces and off of screens? Absolutely, yes. And the Malzahn offense that he was just in at UCF, it's a Malzahn offense. You know what I mean? Like it's a lot of inside zone, a lot of play action. There's just not a whole lot of downfield routes for Harvey. So that being said, like maybe, we really shouldn't be holding some of the college receiving production against some of these guys when they simply weren't asked to do it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I look at the receiving stuff too as more of like, who has like a glaring red flag? Like Phil Maffa has a glaring red flag.
Yeah. Okay. Right?
Like Maffa is someone, but then if there's someone who has like an elite receiving profile, I'll also say, oh wow, this guy is very, very interesting as a receiver. Maybe he could do even more than what people are projecting or whatever, like a CMC, has one of those profiles. I actually think that like in my model, at least, like Jaden Blue actually had a really good receiving profile as well. And so Harvey's more in that bucket of like, fine. And if you're just going to get some of those simple routes anyway, then that's all we care about in fantasy. We're just trying to gobble up receptions at the end of the day, and so he can get those.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, some of the very few running backs get legitimate like first read targets like Christian McCaffrey will. Like it just does not happen. So really to me, when I look at college, in terms of projecting out college running backs and how they'll produce as receivers, it really kind of does come down to like, hey, are you good in the open field? Like, are you good at forcing missed tackles? Like what part of your game in terms of the forcing those missed tackles, like does that translate to the NFL? Yeah. And with RJ Harvey, it's very clear it will.
Let's talk about Bashal Tutin, because at the beginning of the offseason every year, when I start my prospecting works, this is like late January into February, I do an episode on running backs and wide receivers who produce like studs in college. And it's just based on some of the metrics that the ZAP model looks at. And I just dig through and I say, okay, these are the guys who hit thresholds that other successful players at their position hit when they were in college. And one of the surprises out of that was that Bashal Tutin looked great from a production standpoint. And at the time, there wasn't that much, like I didn't even know how to pronounce his name because I hadn't heard anyone really talking about him. And so, I talked about Tutin on that show, and he's kind of been, one of my like go-tos at the running back position. And then obviously the combine happens. He blows up there with his like 118 speed score. he gets decent enough draft capital. I think some people thought that he would even go day 2. Where does yards created have Tootin?
Man, I love Bashal Tootin.
There we go.
It is so hard not to.
He's fun, man.
5.3 yards created per attempt, third best in this class. Jainty, Harvey, Tootin are 1, 2, 3. So he beat out Omari and Hampton by a hair. Hampton obviously a little more volume. Virginia Tech's offensive line and just the team as a whole, like they were really bad, man. Like their offensive line was super inconsistent. There'd be plays where, he'd have perfect blocking and then run 3 or 4 plays where they're just getting destroyed. Virginia Tech was just a bad team last year too, man. Like game script matters in the NFL. It also matters in the NFL or in college for getting carries. Like they were just getting destroyed, some games. They were 6-7 last year. So that's why we saw Tootin, only scare quotes, have 180 carries last year. With Tootin, I think the one thing that I come back to is like a potential red flag just in terms of watching his tape. He is an outside zone runner for sure. I think there are plays where he would drift too far on like that zone blocking wave and he kind of let his eyes get ahead of his feet. If he can slow down some of the processing stuff and clean up the fumbles, I know he fumbled, of course, on the freaking first day of OTAs.
Right away, yeah.
I had 5 fumbles for him last year. 3 of them were lost. That is a problem. Yeah. But you see the clear upside in the yards created numbers. I love hearing that the Zap model liked him, especially because he had 23 receptions, man. Like, he was clustered. Yeah, he was clustered from a score perspective. He was with Caleb Johnson and RJ Harvey in the Zap model. Okay. Yeah. And it's the same thing, man. Like, same thing we were talking about with Hampton, like just wasn't really asked to run a robust route trees. Honestly, same thing as Harvey, like lots of flat routes, lots of spacing routes. And those plays just typically don't produce yards. If you've got a flat route where you're the 4th read in a play and the defender is like already on your ass, like it's just hard. It's extremely hard. Can we talk real quickly about Tootin in this draft capital? Because
sure.
Okay, so he was the 2nd pick of day 3, right?
Yeah.
104.
Yeah.
Caleb Johnson went 15 picks ahead of him.
Right.
And there's a little difference in terms of the hit rate. If you look at that, you bin players by that, but it's a 15 pick difference. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't care.
Should we really be holding that against him?
I don't care that much. So when I talk about draft, because I even have done episodes on talking about how day 1, day 2, day 3 backs and kind of grouping them that way. I think people need to understand, and I've said it before on the show, but people need to understand that that's me trying to make it more consumable for people to kind of conceptually immediately understand. In the model itself, in the Zap model, it's looking at pure raw draft capital. Well, it's looking at draft capital and then 10%, the mock draft stuff. But it's all, and it's not linear. It's based on history and stuff like that, but it's not a linear number that it's looking at. But, I don't want people to think, oh, now it's day 3. Therefore, the first pick on day 3 is substantial or is the same as the 100th pick on day 3. It's not. It's not the same at all. So that's part of the reason why Tootin looks still really decent in the model. And I think that you can almost take advantage of that in rookie drafts and in the market in general is because people are labeling him a day 3 pick, which he is. But there's a very big difference between where Tootin got drafted and where Kyle Monangai got drafted. People, Tootin is very much more from a draft capital score perspective closer to Caleb Johnson than he is, a guy who went in the 6th or 7th round.
Yeah, I think it's interesting hearing and seeing some of the market, on Underdog specifically. Caleb Johnson is going in the 70s, which is a fair price, good price. Tootin's obviously got a little more backfield competition with Etienne and Bigsby. Mm-hmm. I get that, but in terms of the capital, they're essentially kind of the same bets. I always. Different. Yeah, same but different. Yeah, I always say late day 2 and early day 3 running backs, they're plus 400 bets. You know what I mean? If you're a better, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's 4 to 1. I just like the odds with Tootin though. I like the 4 to 1 odds.
Yeah, I do. I love them. I am very much into Tootin. I love just the Jacksonville backfield is the perfect ambiguous backfield. The stuff that I've researched for so long. Pittsburgh is too, but the offense in Jacksonville should be elevated this year. You should be throwing darts. I don't even think it's just throw darts at Tootin. I think Tootin is a good bet, sure, but still throw darts at the other guys too, because especially from a best ball perspective, because you never know what will end up happening. Tank
Bigsby outplayed Travis Etienne last year. Etienne's on the 5th year of an expiring rookie contract with a new coach, new GM. Tootin's chances of being, he's not going to be the week 1 starter, but week 8 starter, like that's when it matters.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think Tootin pairs really well with Bigsby if we're thinking long term too. You know, you get more of that slasher with Tootin. It's like a Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet situation where Walker is that like true slasher. Actually, Walker was a analytical comp for Tootin in the Zap model. Not to say that they're the same kind of like exact same player, but both of those, like, they're both, it's funny because they're both like home run hitting backs with the same size profile, same speed type profile. Walker more prolific, obviously, and better, but like, it's that kind of archetype that in my opinion, that we could be looking at with Tootin. And so I see the similarities, with like what Seattle has done. And obviously Walker's been the guy that's won out, in Seattle. And so maybe Tootin could be the guy that wins out in Jacksonville.
You and I see this the same way. I have the same vision of like, this will be Tootin and Bigsby. Bigsby kind of gives them that like in between the tackles. He was good in between the tackles and grinding. Like, that's what we all thought he could be coming out. He was much better at that last year. Yeah. And, Etienne and Tootin kind of have that like a little bit of similar skill set.
Get them in space kind of guys and let them do their thing. Yeah. And like Etienne might be fine in 2025. It's more so I'm thinking more, once he's almost definitely gone next year. Having that 2-headed backfield really makes a lot of sense. All right, let's talk Quinshon Judkins because he had a lot of receiving red flags in the Zap model. He got boosted a little bit by teammate score. He actually had okay enough teammates. He played with like Zach Evans and stuff before he transferred to Ohio State. But then obviously he plays with Travion last year. But he had some receiving red flags, and that has me probably more like in line with ADP, maybe slightly lower in terms of like where people were drafting him. How does yards created see Judkins? Because this is a player who hypothetically would be boosted in a model like the Zap model by rushing more than receiving, but I'm not looking at the rushing stuff. Right.
Henderson is certainly the better pass catcher and player in the pass game right now, but Judkins is a better running back. Beat him by yards created and missed tackles forced per carry. Judkins is my style of running back, man. Like I just will always love these types of running backs who are extremely physical and have that really, really good like one cut ability. Yeah. Judkins is just constantly getting, turning 2-yarders into 4 and 5 yarders. And that's like just stuff we see all the time with starting running backs in the NFL. It's like those unsexy runs that, generate the extra couple of yards. Yeah. I could certainly see how Judkins especially relative to Travion Henderson, his explosiveness, like didn't look as good as a receiver. Yeah. He's not as good as a pass protector as Henderson either. So I have them ranked back to back. I have Judkins at 4, Henderson at 5. Yeah. And it's basically like, hey, the big difference here is like, I think Judkins is a slightly better running back right now. Henderson, though, has more upside simply because of the receiving profile.
Yeah. All right, I want to talk about Caleb Johnson because the model definitely likes him, comped him to Le'Veon and James Conner, which was hilarious because he then goes to Pittsburgh. At the end of the day, it's the most Pittsburgh Steelers running back of all time. Yeah. And the fit to me seems pretty perfect with Arthur Smith and the scheme that he runs. But are you hesitating at all with Johnson? Because he seems like a player who is like, maybe he's just above average rather than elite or great.
I'm pretty concerned about Caleb Johnson. I think he's slightly overdrafted right now. 4.1 yards created per attempt puts him in the 23rd percentile all time since 2016. Yeah, it places him, 9th in this class. He's slightly behind Jaden Blue and Jarquez Hunter. Obviously, Blue, way fewer carries. Caleb Johnson, I mean, he's like he's a professional runner in the sense that he always gets what's blocked. Like, there were very few plays where he was out of position, but he greatly benefited from Iowa's offensive line. They have an awesome offensive line, especially on the interior, but it's not just that. They were I think the 4th or 5th most run heavy team in college football last year. If you adjust for game script, they were basically number 1 in run rate. And it was for a reason. Though they were mauling up front, and this offense, man, they just did, if you want like teach tape on how to use receivers in motion and use receivers to deceive a defense, just flick on Iowa last year, man. Like they were moving guys off the ball, constantly confusing the defense, and it just opened up some humongous lanes for Johnson. And to his credit, he always got to the right spot. But then I look at it, it's like, okay, he had this great system, he had this great scheme. okay, his yards blocked numbers are really high. Like Iowa's offensive line opened up 2.5 yards blocked per carry. That's second best in the class. It's one of the best scores I've ever had in my database. Okay, is he elusive? And the answer is no.
Yeah.
0.28 missed tackles forced per carry is very subpar. And it's kind of like the Omarion Hampton corollary, but in the sense of Hampton's just way better at the power speed game than Johnson
more powerful,
is.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Johnson's missed tackle numbers are in the 30th percentile since 2016. Hampton's in like nearly 90th percentile. But I'm with you. I say all of this. The yards created profile is a little concerning. It's just kind of mid. But man, it's a perfect spot. Like, Jaylen Warren is, he's on a 1-year deal as a restricted free agent. And you said it's the most Steelers pick of all time. It is. Like, he's going to be their early down running back. He's going to get the goal line carries. We don't think this offense is going to be very good, but like that role for fantasy is incredibly valuable. And these guys just form a very nice complementary duo between Johnson and Warren.
Yeah, I like the duo a lot. And like I said, I think that there's at least that like potential bell cow upside, entering year 2. Whereas I do think that, going back to like Harvey or something, we know that Sean Payton will still likely split his backfield, but we know that those touches are just going to be so much more valuable at the end of the day, exactly. From a fantasy perspective. All right. Before I let you go, I need to hear about Jarquez Hunter, Jaden Blue, and Cam Scatterbo, because Jarquez Hunter was my go-to day 3 sleeper when I would go on podcasts and stuff before the draft. And the model loves him. Jaden Blue, the model really likes him, surprisingly, even though size is an input and he's obviously on the smaller side. And then Cam Scatterbo, because of his adjusted 40 time at for it being a pro day, he got dinged a little bit from a speed score perspective. So he's kind of looks neutral in the model at this point. But just give your quick take on those 3 guys, before we end things here.
Scatterbo will probably be a little longer, real quick.
Okay. Yeah, do what you got to do.
3.9 yards created per carry, 18th percentile. The missed tackle force numbers weren't that great. I just saw a lot of plays where he basically got caught behind, either from behind or from the side. And those really stood out to me. Like, he's just going to get tackled very easily at the NFL. I think I'm still betting on Tyrone Tracy. You mentioned him early in the show. Yeah. Tracy's yards created numbers and missed tackle numbers were just significantly better. Scatterbo is, he's a pretty good pass catcher, sure hands, very competitive in pass protection. So it's going to be interesting to see, like, if he can I think he actually might form a role in passing downs, not as a runner.
Yeah.
But Scatterbo, I ranked him 10th in the class, man. Like, this is a really good group. I actually ranked him behind Hunter and Jaden Blue. And I love hearing that Jaden Blue popped in the Zap model.
Talk to me about Blue, man. I got to hear this. Okay. Yeah.
All right. So I went back and looked. There's 12 running backs that have averaged at least 4 yards created and forced at least 0.3 missed tackles forced per carry. And for what it's worth, those are like 35th percentile ish. It's like, you're decent. You're not a good prospect. You're decent.
Yeah.
So then I bend those guys with the guys that had more than 350 receiving yards in their final college season. I got this list. I got Jaden Blue, Omarion Hampton, Zach Moss, Alvin Kamara, Kareem Hunt, Bucky Irving, Najee Harris, CEH, womp womp, Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon, Travis Etienne, and Saquon freaking Barkley.
Wow.
That's it.
Wow.
That's my list. I think he could have potentially not just had he had 370 receiving yards. I think he could have had 450 if Quinn Ewers were good, maybe 500. There were a number of plays where Blue would he would immediately get separation underneath, like angle routes, wheel routes, like legitimate, hey, we're asking you not only to get on top of this linebacker, but you got to get open. And he was gaining 1, 2, 3 steps of separation on those routes. And then you mix in the fact that he's a pretty good runner and he was behind, Bijan. He was behind Roschon. He was behind Jonathan Brooks. It's okay, I can tell myself a story here. And then he gets drafted by Dallas and he has decent draft capital. Jaden Blue's my RB7 in this class. I have him ahead of Caleb Johnson.
Wow.
And that might be bold. It's a bet on the receiving profile though.
Yeah.
Jarquez Hunter, love hearing that you loved him as a sleeper man. This is one of my big bets this year that he beats out Blake Corum.
Yeah.
Hunter's 4.4 yards created per carry is literally a full yard better than Blake Corum. Corum's yards created profile was really bad last year. Like I caught a bunch of hate when I when I put out my numbers on Corum. A lot of Michigan bros were pissed.
Yeah.
But Hunter is just objectively a better running back. And you look at the draft capital. I mean, Hunter won at 117, Corum won at 87. We just had the whole debate about, Caleb Johnson versus Bashil Tootin. And it's like, it's only 30 picks a difference. Doesn't really concern me that much. Hunter, man, I mean, he's got that sustaining ability to handle volume on the inside, and he's got some big play upside. Yards created it certainly shows that.
I think Hunter's really, to me, super attractive in this offense because this offense lacks that explosion. Like, Kyron Williams has done what he's done, sure, but he's not an explosive back. He's a very solid back who can do a lot, but he's not that explosive of a back. And Jarquez Hunter tested really well. To me, looks like he could play that role and be that kind of guy. I know that he's gained some steam, but it's like it's logical at the end of the day, in my opinion, as to why he would be, ranked where he's being ranked. I'm with you on that. It passes all of my sniff test. He passed the yards created. It was pretty good. He's better than Corum, and he's cheap, man. Like you said, he's coming up in best ball. But we were drafting, not me, but everybody was drafting Corum in the second round of rookie drafts last year. But Jarquez Hunter's a fourth rounder. Yeah, right. Why? What are we doing? Like, what did Blake Corum do last season to, keep that job? Like he never got on the field. I am concerned, JJ, though, that like Hunter is somebody that we like. He's a sleeper, but like he's not Kyron Williams.
Like he's literally loves him like a son.
Physically just not Kyron Williams and doesn't have the attitude of Kyron. Yeah, all of that. 100%. Like Kyron being a free agent next year, if he doesn't sign a contract, I mean, that's where the Hunter stuff is just very, very intriguing. Like I'm still expecting year one for Hunter, but this year to be a Kyron Williams year for the most part, I think that's at least what the expectation would be. But I do think there's a chance that Kyron maybe dips in rush share by like 10% and, they mix in these guys a little bit more. And like the other thing too, and I say this all the time, but like that McVay tree and the Rams in general, I think they drafted Blake Corum wanting more of that duplicate of Kyron Williams because they like to rotate by drive as opposed to down and distance in those offenses. And so, you could do a 2 drive on, 1 drive off for Kyron and mix in Blake Corum, but I just don't think that Corum was able to just do that. Like, I don't think he was, I don't want to say good enough because we don't know for sure, but maybe that was the case. And then he gets hurt, obviously, and that hurt things as well. But like, I think they have the same vision with Jarquez Hunter. Like it's another smaller, not like total, I shouldn't say smaller. He's like 204 or something, but he's not, an Amarian Hampton. He's at 215 plus. And I think they have this idea with a guy like Hunter where they can mix him in, see what happens. And what if they mix him in and like, he's really, really good, then what happens?
I think you're right. I think that was the plan with Kyron last year is they wanted to do, like you said, the drive, split drives. The Corum is just, he's not good. Like I'll say it, like he's not good.
I'll let you say it.
Like Jarquez Hunter is a better prospect and he is like the top target for me in the fourth round. Like I would, if I have a few teams where I'm like dead at running back. Yeah. I've been trying to move up in like the late third round just to get him. I will say real quick to put a bow on it, like, Kyron Williams had some fumble issues last year. Yeah, sure, he's not an explosive runner, but like Sean McVay will give him all the goal line carries as long as he keeps doing it.
Yes.
And I saw a couple weeks ago from Cam DeSilva, one of the Rams beat writers. He was saying that, they're talking about extending Kyron. So we've been talking till we're blue in the face as fantasy analysts about Corum, about Hunter, why they're going to replace Kyron.
It's just going to be Kyron.
Dude, it's just going to be Kyron 14 goal line touchdowns every single year.
Yeah. I mean, look, but at the very least, Hunter can be the top handcuff, at the very least. So.
I think he's significantly underpriced on that alone.
Yeah, 100%. Graham, this was awesome. People are going to really dig it. Let everyone know where they can find your stuff, what you guys are doing at Fantasy Points, all that good stuff.
For sure. Yeah. All of my articles, everything, fantasypoints.com, yards created breakdown has been up for a few weeks. It's free on the site right now. Go check it out. Man, we've just got a ton of stuff coming this summer. Ryan Heath and I are live every week doing best ball breakdown. We're best ball bros just like you, man. We got to get you on the show.
Love it. Yeah.
We'll get you on the show at some point this summer. Ryan and I are on our YouTube channel every week. talking best ball. And then, man, we just it's June, a ton of fantasy articles coming out.
Yeah.
Check out my Twitter feed at Graham Barfield. I tweet out all of my articles still, even though Twitter hates it. But yeah, man, this was great catching up with you. This is a fun running back class.
Yes.
Just to put a bow on this show, I think so. I originally thought that a few of these guys, like we talked about Tootin, I thought Caleb Johnson would go a little earlier too. It's not the 2017 class.
Yeah.
But at the top, it's pretty close. Like, it's not as deep as the 17 class, but those top 4 that we were talking about are on par with that 17 class.
Yeah.
So maybe the depth isn't as good, but I'm curious as what you think.
Yeah. Well, the 17 class also got worse draft capital. I think people remember. Like, it wasn't like it was an like there were other draft classes, depending on how you label draft capital, of course. But like 2020, I think it was, had better draft capital than the 2017 one. It's just that so many dudes ended up hitting. Like, you had, Alvin Kamara in that class, and you had, Kareem Hunt in that. Like, there's just dudes. And then you had multiple day 3 hits, which is not, we usually see like one, maybe 2, but you had like 3 of them or so like hit, or at least if you want to throw, like, I think James Conner was in that too, but like he was technically day 2, but he was late day 2. Yeah. I mean, like, I see it as well. Like, in the prospect model and the ZAP model, a lot of guys had what are dubbed low risk profiles, which means the model liked them more than where their draft capital was. And that's big. I mean, those are guys that generally hit, at a higher rate.
Hell yeah. Yeah. So, I love it. This is definitely one of the best running back classes that I've charted. And I'm glad your numbers kind of back that up too.
Yeah, man. Of course. You guys can check my stuff out, over on lateround.com. Make sure you are purchasing the prospect guide, which I've referenced a lot on the show. That's still for sale. And then pre-order the late round draft guide as well. That's my game theory heavy, drafts, a season long guide where I'm digging into ADP trends and all that fun stuff. Been working on that a lot over the last few weeks. But that'll be out on July 1st. Pre-order it before the price goes up on July 1st. Otherwise, everyone, thanks for tuning in.